Hi everyone and welcome to our Parent Carer workshop on supporting the transition to high school. We know that some young people can find the transition to high school difficult, whilst others adapt really well to it. It's also important to acknowledge that this can also be a time of transition for parents, carers too. It is a different school, different teachers, different way of working, communicating. It can be really useful to find out in advance how the new high school will communicate with you as well. In this workshop, we are going to look at why a positive and successful transition is so important, how you as parents, carers can support your child's emotional well-being during the transition to high school, as well as recapping anxiety, as it can be a stressful time for some, and some of the important brain changes that may be going on for your child at this time. We will finish by signposting you to local support services in the Calderdale area. So I will just introduce myself briefly first. My name is Alice and I'm the Mental Health in Schools Practitioner for Open Minds CAMHS. So my job involves delivering workshops to schools on various mental health, emotional wellbeing topics. I deliver parent carer workshops and staff training and training for professionals in the Calderdale area as well. I will just try and explain the Open Minds and North Point link now. The Open Minds Partnership is a partnership of local organisations that works together in Calderdale to support young people's emotional health and mental health. North Point is the organisation that I work for, and we are the lead provider in the Open Minds Partnership. So we provide what you might know as CAMHS services for children and young people. So that one-to-one specialist mental health support for children and young people, alongside our colleagues in the NHS SWIFT, which stands for South West Yorkshire Foundation NHS Trust. Our colleagues in the NHS work with more complex and more long-lasting, enduring mental health difficulties. So together, we provide the one-to-one specialist mental health support. North Point also runs the First Point of Contact service, which you might have heard of before. The First Point of Contact is the first point of contact for all mental health and emotional wellbeing referrals for children and young people in Calderdale. So if you would like some advice about your child or young person, maybe you have some concerns, maybe you are wondering if some support would be useful, you can ring them up. They might book you in for a call back, they might signpost you to a more appropriate service or encourage you to make a referral. And I will point out their phone number for you at the end of this workshop. They can also offer you any risk support if you do have any risk concerns. We also have the Open Minds website, which has lots of really good information, resources on there for parents, carers, young people and professionals, and it's always a good starting point if you do want any advice or you're wondering about any support. We are also one of the neurodevelopmental support and assessment pathways in Calderdale, and we also deliver the mental health support teams in schools. So these are a team of clinicians and mental health practitioners who work in selected schools in Calderdale to provide early prevention, low-level mental health interventions and signposting and advice, and also whole school approach advice as well. So that's what North Point offers in the Open Minds partnership. Hopefully that's helpful. At the end of the workshop, we will also go over some of the other services in the Open Minds partnership and what kind of support they provide as well. So the aims of this particular workshop, then we're going to look at the impact of the transition to high school. So we'll look at what might be a successful transition. We're going to look at positive outcomes as well as perhaps some more negative outcomes. We'll look at why a positive transition is so important and the benefits of this. And like I mentioned at the start, we're also going to look at some of the changes to your child's development at this time and how this can affect their behaviour. And then we'll finish by looking at how you as parents, carers can support the transition to high school and of course further support available. So let's look at what we mean by transition. Transition means a change from one thing to another. There are lots of examples of transitions in everyday life, like starting a new job, moving to school, moving house, even the seasons changing. There are two different types of change, discontinuous and focal. A discontinuous change is a more sudden, unplanned change. An example of this might be when we were all told to go into lockdown during the COVID pandemic. A focal change is where the change is more planned, and it is usually the only change. So hopefully it goes without saying that we hope that the transition to high school is a focal change for young people. Transition is easier when it is the only change in the young person's life. So it is really important that other areas of the young person's life are secure and stable, like home life, for example. There are still other changes that happen during this time, like changes to their social circle and to their brain, which we will look at later on. We have all gone through transitions in our own lives. Have you found it easier to have one change at a time or lots all at the same time? At this point, I would encourage you to reflect on a change in your own life. This could be moving house, it could be starting a new job, or a smaller change like joining a new gym class. What was the change and how did you feel about it? Were you worried? And did you do anything that helped? For example, did you do your research? Did you do any practice runs? Did you organise yourself? An example of my own would be when I started a new job. I was definitely nervous about it, so I packed my work bag the night before, I got my lunch ready, and I was especially worried about the commute because I didn't know the area well. So I spent a lot of time preparing the routes, looking at traffic, and making sure I had a plan B if traffic was bad. And these are really useful transferable ideas when thinking about preparing young people for high school. It might help if they pack their bag the night before to plan the route to school and practice this if possible. If appropriate, it might be nice to discuss an example of when you had to manage change with your young person. This normalises change and also helps them to see that everyone has to go through it, even adults. And you might be able to share some of the ways you coped with that change, again, if appropriate. So before we get into transition in more detail, we're going to start by just briefly mentioning and recapping worry and anxiety. As it is normal that during the transition to high school, some young people may worry a little bit more because it can be a stressful event. But remember, worry is normal. We all worry about things from time to time. It's a normal human emotion, just like it's normal for us to feel happy, angry, or sad from time to time. It's just really important that we are able to manage those worries, let go of those worries, and calm ourselves down. Anxiety, however, is when we might notice that we are worrying about lots of different things all the time. And it might feel really difficult to let go of these worries, to relax and calm down, to think about anything else or do anything else because we're so preoccupied by the worry. And like all mental health difficulties, anxiety starts to become more of a problem when it starts to affect their everyday life. By this we mean, does it stop them from doing things we would normally expect a young person their age to be able to do, like go to school, answer a question in class, or hang out with their friends? Remember though, anxiety is our body's defense mechanism. It's a survival mechanism. It developed millions of years ago, back with the cavemen. They lived in a really dangerous and hostile environment, and so developed this survival instinct, which is what we know as the fight, flight, freeze response. Bit of a tongue twister. Now, we are more sophisticated and developed, but we still have this defense mechanism in us, the fight, flight, freeze response, and it's useful. For example, if we go to cross the road and a car suddenly comes around the corner towards us, our brain activates our fight, flight, freeze response, which tells us to get out of the way. When we go into our fight, flight, freeze response, our brain releases the hormone adrenaline, which prepares our body for action. And this is what causes some of the physical symptoms we might associate with anxiety, like increased heart rate, breathing getting quicker, feeling hot and sweaty, butterflies in the tummy, feeling shaky. However, our fight, flight, freeze response becomes more of a problem when our brains tell us to go into the fight, flight, freeze in normal, everyday situations, like speaking in class, doing a performance, taking a test. Other common symptoms of anxiety include overthinking, what if thoughts, having lots of worries about the future, like what if nobody talks to me in high school? What if I get lost and late for class? What if I forget things I need? So worries about the future that we don't even know are going to come true or not. Avoidance, safety behaviours, reassurance seeking, so asking lots of questions to get reassurance, and those physical symptoms of anxiety that we just mentioned. So some warning signs that you could look out for that might indicate that your young person is struggling with anxiety include being late for school, avoiding or refusing to talk about it or go, struggling to separate from caregivers, presenting as overly emotional, often with very little trigger. It can include asking lots of questions to seek reassurance, and often these questions can be repeated. It may involve avoiding or refusing to do certain things, go to certain places, for example, speaking in front of a class. Avoidance of specific objects, scenarios like dogs, blood, the bus, might indicate a specific phobia. I think it's important to note here, though, that everyone has things that they are scared of, and that might be a phobia. For example, I have a phobia of spiders. However, this doesn't stop me getting my coat, even though there are spiders next to the door. It doesn't stop me leaving the house to go to work or do the shopping, and so on. If it did, this would be considered a mental health problem. So for a phobia to be considered a mental health problem, it has to have an impact on day-to-day life. Other warning signs of anxiety might include worrying about what other people think, mind reading, trying to people please, and a sense of perfectionism. It might include being very fidgety or having difficulty concentrating, some of the physical symptoms of anxiety that were mentioned earlier, and it can also affect appetite and sleep. However, this is not an exhaustive list. Some, all, and none of these things might be present. And some of these things might also indicate other concerns, so we need to have a conversation and explore these with the young person. We're now going to briefly look at some of the changes that are also happening at this time. As your young person approaches adolescence, their brains also start to go through some changes. And in fact, this is one of the key periods of brain development for young people. We have pathways or synapses in the brain which help us to do things. So for example, when you tell your young person to practice, you're absolutely right. If, for example, they play a musical instrument, then the more they practice and use that pathway in the brain, the stronger it becomes. So the more we use a certain pathway, the more it becomes embedded. So if a child is experiencing adverse life challenges, then those pathways become more ingrained. So the experiences and environment a child is exposed to at this time molds and determines those synapses. But what happens in adolescence is the brain starts to get rid of those pathways that are not used anymore. This is called pruning, or I think of it like the brain having a good old spring clean. But this can cause some changes to behaviour. Often we associate teenage behaviour with hormonal changes, which do play a part, but some of these changes are also due to the brain changes. The brain becomes more sensitive to the feeling of stress, and this is repeated in difficult environments. As children move towards secondary age, they are suddenly aware of what they can do, but are still restricted by their age, and therefore this can cause internal and external frustration. In early adolescence, children see situations as very black and white, and this often results in them being at odds with themselves. Egocentrism, so thinking that you are the focus of attention, is also increased, and this can make a child easily overwhelmed and feel like they are the focus of everyone's attention, and therefore they can become more self-conscious. These changes in neurostructure can also lead to increased irritability, which if you have teenagers you might already know about, and anhedonia, which means taking little or no pleasure in things. This means they might not be interested in their hobbies anymore or things they used to enjoy. Their reward processing also changes. They become more goal-orientated and motivated for change, and they don't care as much about consequences. Their decision-making capacity is also affected, as they are able to incorporate previous experience into their decision-making. But actually, these skills don't fully develop until the mid-20s, as well as regulation of complex social behaviours, empathy responses, considering other people's perspectives and social behaviours. None of these areas are fully developed until adulthood, which I think is important to be aware of, as when they go to high school, they might be given a lot of independence. They have to navigate social relationships and situations, and it can be a stressful time. So it's important to remember that their brains are still developing, so we need to support them and nurture them during these times. The other big change at this time is that young people tend to move away from family relationships and place greater value on their peer relationships. So there is a huge amount of change going on for young people at this time, as well as having to navigate the transition to high school. One of the other outcomes of all the hormonal and brain changes is a possible increase in risk-taking behaviour. This is due to the increased levels of testosterone, which is also present in girls but in lower levels, which is linked to risk-taking. Also, we've just seen how the brain is changing and developing, and this happens from the back of the brain to the front. So at the back of the brain, we have our emotional brain and the amygdala, which is responsible for risk-taking, impulsivity, sensation-seeking. And then at the front of the brain, we have our thinking, rational brain, which is responsible for helping us to control our impulses and moderate our behaviour. So we have the part of the brain which is impulsive and risk-taking, which develops first and is more developed, but the part of the brain which is rational and helps us to manage this is the last to develop, so is often underdeveloped at this time. So you can see why this might cause some challenges. But the good news is that due to other brain changes, young people are better at evaluating social situations and thinking about the consequences of their behaviour. So we can help and support young people to help them see the risks of their behaviour and how these can affect other people, especially their peers. Help them to see the social risks, like looking like an idiot in front of their friends or losing their friends' relationships, as this is what is important to them at this age. And point out positive practices in their peers, because again, this is where their focus is. So let's look at the transition to high school in more detail now. Research has shown that a successful transition means being able to make and maintain new friendships in their high school, maintaining levels of positive self-esteem and confidence, being school motivated and engaged with school and school work. It includes being able to adapt well to new routines and school organisation and not experiencing any break in their learning. The outcomes for young people can vary depending on their transition experience. A more positive transition experience can lead to increased friendships, good self-esteem, school motivation and academic success, increased confidence and being able to adapt. Whereas a poor transition experience can lead to school refusal, reduced academic achievement and possible mental health difficulties. This is not here to scare you, these are just some of the worst case examples of the impact of a negative transition, which is why it's so important that we make sure that the transition to high school is a positive one for our young people. So this has been taken from many different pieces of research, and you can see that the top worries and what a child feels is important are the same. For example, they worry about making new friends, and it is important to them that they are liked and that they do make friends. As parents, carers, you might have different worries and find other things important, like the distance from home or the school being of a high standard, that is the choice of your child, or that siblings attend and that friends attend. But it is important to be mindful of your own worries about the transition, and if you know that you have your own worries, make sure you are using your own coping strategies for managing these and try not to show these to your child. So how can you support the transition to high school? Well, the Anna Foy Centre identified 4 ways for you to help your child with the transition. Help them to explore their feelings, to connect to their new school, help them to build relationships and friendships, and empower them. We will look at each of these in more detail next. The Anna Foy Centre also produced a fantastic animation following 4 young people starting high school and the first year. We will put the link in the notes in case you would like to watch it, and if appropriate, show your child. It can be a great starting point for having a conversation and exploring how your child is feeling about the move to high school. Let's start with explore. Help your young person to explore how they're feeling about the move to high school and to talk about these feelings. Let them know that it's okay to talk about it and that you are there to listen. Mark the end to their primary school experience. Really celebrate this and their time at the school. Say proper goodbyes, talk about good memories with them. Allow your young person to ask you questions and talk about any worries they might have about high school. It might be that you can quickly clear up any misunderstandings or misconceptions they might have. You can use examples from your own secondary school experience to help with this, if appropriate. As well as discussing any worries they may have, make sure you are talking about all the things to look forward to as well. It's important that they see this as an exciting change with lots to look forward to. And finally, if you haven't done so already or you aren't aware, find out what your child's primary school is doing to support the transition and continue that work at home. It is really important that we help young people to connect to their new school. This might include looking at the school website, looking at the staff bios or pictures, attending induction events or open evenings. Try to meet key members of staff if possible. Consider, with your child, identifying a key member of staff who can be a first point of contact, for example, a form tutor or head of year. Make sure that you know how best to communicate with the school. They might have a different way of doing things compared to primary school. Is there a school app or portal that needs to be downloaded, for instance? One of the worries we hear about the most from Year 6 pupils is about how they will get to their new school. And for some young people, this might be the first time they're going to school by themselves. So help your young person to plan their journey to high school. If they will be going on a bus, try the route with them beforehand and point out recognisable buildings along the way so they have something to focus on when they are on their own. Purchase bus passes in advance so that the young person can feel organised and not worry about getting this sorted. Young people also tell us that they worry about missing the bus, so make sure you have a plan B agreed with your child just in case this happens. If they are walking, practice the walk with them to build their confidence. Time it so they know how long it takes and what time they need to set off. And finally, if your child is struggling, then after a few weeks, as it does take time to settle in somewhere new, get in touch with the school to discuss this and put support in place. Moving on to building friendships and relationships. Help your young person to think about how they can approach meeting new people and how to start a conversation. You could role play this at home to practice or help them to write down things they could talk about as a reminder. Encourage your child to join some extracurricular activities over the holidays so that they can practice making new friends, and encourage them to join an after school or lunchtime club in their new school, as this will help them to meet like-minded young people. You could also consider planning in activities over the holidays to allow your child to meet up with other young people going to the same school if possible. Finally, we need to empower our young people to feel more confident and independent. Could you support your child to start being more independent and to take on small responsibilities in the home? Independence can be encouraged even in Year 6. Could they pack their own school bag or lunch? Could they pack their own bag if you go away on holiday or on a school trip, even if you need to check it or pack another bag just in case? And it's really important that we are building their self-esteem as much as possible in the run-up to high school. So try and give your child lots of praise and notice all their achievements and things that they do well. Here are some other things to consider. Share information about the change with the young person. Talk about other changes the young person has experienced and the positive things attached to them. Talk about a change that you have experienced and how some anxiety is normal. Think about how you feel about the change and try not to put your worries on the child. Organise and attend visits. Wherever possible, attend any open evenings or events put on at the secondary school. This gives the young person the chance to familiarise themselves with the building and layout and also to recognise some of the teaching staff. You may be able to view virtual tours on the website as well. Allow time to discuss worries. So allocate some time to sit down with your young person and talk through any worries that they might have. Encourage your child to pack things, to have a checklist. So like we just talked about, independence in young people should be encouraged even before the transition. So this includes the young person writing out the days of the week and list what they need to take on each day so that this can be used as a checklist. In Year 6, young people can be encouraged to pack their own things for school or for trips or days out. Consider the young person's self-esteem. A confident young person will adapt quicker to the transition, so consider if there might be some work to do on your child's self-esteem. And there are lots of ideas available to help you if required, and you can speak to your school for support with this as well. Plan the first day, the first week together. So plan how that first day will go. Do they want a special dinner, for example? Do they want to do something really nice after school to celebrate? Would they like to do something really nice at the weekend to celebrate their first week of school? Involve them in the preparations for secondary school. So allow your child to choose their new school supplies, their bag, involve them when buying the uniform. And be patient. Your child might feel worried as the day approaches or might change their behaviour, but be patient with them. Allow them to ask questions again, talk to them about changes in your own life as well, and try and normalise some of those feelings and reassure them. And provide distractions. We don't want them to dwell on the transition throughout the whole summer holidays. So encourage them to start a new activity or do a hobby or maybe help you with a job instead. We're now going to look at some resources and how you can use these with your child to help them explore how they are feeling about the transition to high school. Like we've already discussed, it is really useful to sit down with your child and discuss with them some of their worries about high school, as well as some of the things they're excited about. If your young person is worried about high school, agreeing on an action plan can be really useful. Could you sit down with your child and complete the plan together? Help them to explore the worry, to rate it, and to identify what coping skills they already have to help them manage the worry. Help them identify what school could do to help, and what you, as parents carers, could also do. If possible, it can be really useful to share this with school as well so that they're aware. And make sure that you review the plan regularly to make sure it is still relevant and still working. A self-soothe box is a lovely activity that you could do together with your young person over the holiday. You will need an empty shoebox or container. You can decorate it if you like, and then find items to fill the box which help to ground and relax your child. Ideally, find items which soothe all of the 5 senses. There is a great video you can watch, and then, if appropriate, you can show your child, which explains the purpose of the self-soothe box and gives some examples of what you can put in it. We will put the link in the notes if you would like to watch it. This is an example of one that I created. I just used a plastic box, but I'm sure you and your child can make yours look much nicer than this. I have a squishy ball in mine, which is quite satisfying to squeeze. I have some bubbles. I have a fruit tea bag, and I have a therapy band for stretching, and some nice smelling hand cream. And I also have some positive cards and well-being tips, as well as a small blank notebook for writing or drawing. Then the idea is that when the young person is feeling stressed, overwhelmed or dysregulated, they can get their self-soothe box out and get something out of the box which will help them to feel better. Other tips you can consider: if you notice that your young person is worrying a lot, then encourage them to set a worry time. This is a time for worrying when you and your child can sit down and discuss anything that is worrying them. This helps as your child will hopefully learn to postpone and sit with their worries. Mindfulness and breathing exercises can be useful too, as they help to focus the brain on the breathing, leaving less space for worries, so they can help the young person to feel more present in the moment. You can get apps to help you with these. Consider routines and discuss with your young person what their new routine will look like when they move to high school, as it will more than likely change. And make sure that they practice getting into this new routine towards the end of the summer holidays, so it's not a big shock to them in September. Finally, be patient with them and reassure them. Remember that change can feel difficult and that it's our job to support our young people through this. It is also important to ensure that your child has a healthy lifestyle. This helps promote positive emotional well-being and to build resilience, which is needed to help manage change and setbacks. A healthy lifestyle includes eating healthily, getting enough sleep, and regular exercise. Okay, so we're just going to spend the last few minutes of this workshop going over further support services available in the Calderdale area. So, like I mentioned right at the start, the Open Minds website is a really good starting point if you are looking for advice or looking for further support. Other services in the Open Minds partnership include lots of different services, and they offer different types of support. We also have a digital mental health offer, which is called Silver Cloud, and that is delivered by ourselves at Open Minds CAMHS. So this is free, it involves a minimal wait time, and it is really good for early intervention for mild to moderate anxiety or low mood. It's not suitable for any young people where there are any risk concerns, however. Thank you for listening, and we really hope you found it useful. And finally, best of luck to you and your child with the transition to high school. I'm sure before long they will wonder what they were ever worried about. Thanks for watching.